recovered alcoholic. It's so awesome to see everyone here. Thank you for joining us again tonight. This is we're back into There is a Solution, and we are on page 19, the second paragraph. Well, actually, yeah, the second paragraph. That's it. And I'm here with Bill S. and happy Founders Day, everybody. I just want to take just a couple of seconds. There's been a little bit of in and out here by my house. I just want to take a breath. I'm feeling a little bit jittery tonight. All right, cool. Okay, so we're going to pick up on page 19, the second paragraph. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present which has been so freely given to us? All right, let's go see. It says here, if we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. Well, let's go look at what they're talking about. Like, what was the results? What were the results of those that were on this way? Let's go have a look. Roman numerals XX, page 20 of the doctor's opinion. Roman numerals XX. I'll give you, oh, sorry, it's not the doctor's opinion. I apologize. It's forward to second edition. Here are the stats of those who followed the path. These are the good results. About the fifth line down, it says, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way, which means they took their last breath was a sober breath. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed with AA showed improvement. That, guys, is a 75% success rate. Those are really great results, if you ask me. All right, back on over to page 19. It says
when
here,
you
those
read
of
this
us
next paragraph, Nadia, it'll explain what they're talking about in the paragraph you just read. Because it's interesting that it's not until the second edition, which you read from those that came to AA. Before the book was published, there was no AA to come to. It was a different group. But if you read this next paragraph, maybe I've been enlightened lately. Maybe I'll enlighten the group a little today.
Yeah, you've had some awesome experiences lately. Yeah. So those that live in big cities, all right, so I have the luxury of living in a small town city, but I do know that there's many on here that live in large cities. And although they are speaking about their situation back then when this was written, we can make this work for us now. And it says here, those in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds, line that out, millions are dropping into oblivion every day. We can just look at the fentanyl pandemic, you know, that's happening. I mean, just look at your home group, those that are coming in, just going. You know, recently we've just had in the last month, we've had 2 passings, unfortunately, of souls that didn't make it, because it says, you know, many will pursue this to the gates of insanity or death. And that's on page 30. Many will pursue this to the gates of insanity or death. And that is the obsession, that they can drink and use like more people. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given? And that's what we're doing here tonight. Yes, we're going into the book, and yes, we're going into a lot of the history and a lot of what the words mean. But there's a stirring up for this, for the love of this book, because that's where what this book is all about, is about helping us connect to a power. And we got to get people excited about what's in here, and that's what we're doing here. And there's so much being done today, so much being done today. I mean, there's if you go online, there's a meeting every hour, there's a meeting 24/7. There are podcasts, there are YouTube channels, there are these Zoom platforms, meetings. I think a friend of mine in the States, I don't know what city, I mean, they've got so many, said that there's literally in one street, you can go from one meeting to the next in 1 hour, every hour. There are people who are making this their job to think of how we can take this message and spread it far and wide. And I just want to thank the Big Book Compendium crowd, for doing this. This is amazing. And for the Zoom room, and for managing it and paying the subscription. And you guys that are supporting this. It also says here, we shall bring to the task our combined experience. So you'll hear many of us in the rooms and in the meetings and in shares where they'll say the first 100. I'm still not 100% sure if it was 87 or if it was 100 rounded to or just typical alcoholic, if it was 20, it was that big. But nonetheless, there was a combined effort in bringing this book to the fore. Bill W. dictated to Ruth Hawks, who was his PA at the time, and from the AA rooms in New York, the transcripts were sent back and forth between Akron and AA. And I also went and did a little bit of research this week about how there were 3 consciousness. At our business meeting, we have group consciousness. There were 3 I don't know if I'm using this word correctly. If I am, if I'm not, it's okay. Was the God conscious guys, the more religious doctrine groups in AA or little group. Then there were the group of a little bit more scientific minded, and the third one I can't remember now, but the consensus on what the content was for each chapter, they would bounce it around these groups, and then the group conscience would decide on the final bit that would be put in. So if anybody has a home group, you'll know what that process is all about. Yeah. Bill, you want to jump in now?
You read that paragraph. Did you read the first sentence in that paragraph? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume. Page 19, third full paragraph. You had brought out the sentence. I don't know if I heard you read the whole paragraph. Okay. So here's what it's saying. If we keep on the way we're going, if we remember in a vision for you, it talks about it around the end of 36, maybe the beginning of 37. And Bill had gone back to New York before that. And it says these 3, the 3 that were left back in, as Nadia says, Akron. We call it Akron over here, but call it what you want. Doesn't matter. It's spelled the same, Akron. The 3 that stayed back in Ohio were successful with 7 more. So that means at the end of 18 months, and Bill's got about 2 years sober, there's 11 sober alcoholics on the planet attaching themselves to the edicts found here. And by mid 1939, when the book came out, Dr. Bob would have just shy of 4 years of sobriety. Bill would be the longest sober member of this unnamed outfit until then, with 4.5 years. There was really less than 100. Rob can give us the numbers because he's the fact find guy. He's the detective, just the facts man, Sergeant Friday. But let's say there was 100. So over 4 years' time, there's 100 people on the globe, and they realized that if they went out and tried to save every drunk, how many could they really save, especially with the drunks who were exposed to the message, didn't want it, couldn't get it of that other 50%, it would be a lot of work. So here's what they're telling us they've done. We've have concluded to publish an anonymous volume. They're writing a book so the message can get out in wholesale manuscript to anyone who's interested. But the history of this, which comes much later, is fascinating. And over the weekend, I had the good fortune of going to Akron down at the University of Akron, and it was brought up again about what had taken place when they were supposed to get a publication in the Reader's Digest. They had started to write the manuscript, and one of the editors or the salespeople or the writers for the Reader's Digest said, "That's interesting. Get me a few more chapters and we'll write an article on you." And 6 months later, Bill shows up, and the guy forgot that he ever had the conversation. That was old news, and it never got printed. And then what happened is a guy came in as an undercover spy, so to speak, to prove that Alcoholics Anonymous was like some multi-level marketing. And because of the testimony of the people that had gotten sober and the genuine democracy, as it talks about here in this chapter, of the people who wanted nothing other than to be helpful and knew they must be helpful for their own sobriety. There was no pitch, there was no money, initiation fee, membership, none of that. All of a sudden, his thinking got changed. He became sold. I believe that was Fulton Arsler or something like that. Rob's going to put that up too, you know. And what he did is he did some publications, and all of a sudden, what they had only dreamed of, and they probably, just because Bill was a visionary, he was also very aggressive. He would have probably not been able to handle that, Rob, when he was 6 months sober, if he received 8,000 inquiries overnight. But 4 or 5 years later, as God's preparing this, and I'll tell you what, I was been involved. Some other people have invited me along and probably wish they didn't, to do the big book with them, but I'm there. And just the interesting thing when I think about it, we talk about Bill and Bob when this started, and yesterday we were down in Akron and my sponsor led one of the big meetings, and it was sensational to be a part of. But you go back 4 years in time when a guy named Roland Hazard's off to see Carl Jung because he's looking for a solution for the same dilemma that we suffer from. And I was thinking, you know, everything had to happen precisely in his life up till 1931. Everything had to happen for that meeting to take place. He had to be told that the only hope was to place himself in a conversion of spirit atmosphere. And he told Dr. Young, he said, "I must have it. Where do I find it?" And Carl Jung said, "That's the problem. I don't know." He said, "You got to place yourself in an atmosphere of grace." I'm paraphrasing. I wasn't there like some of you. So I don't pretend to know Bill like some of the people that I know in AA. They can tell you what he was thinking and why he wrote. I'm not that bright. And I'm not that old either. But he told them, you got to place yourself in an atmosphere of grace. Generally, at that time, it was a Christian evangelical movement. And he said, "I must have this thing." And he set out and he found himself in the atmosphere of grace, and what we know is the Oxford group. And then what happened is a judge was a father of one of the members, was sitting on the bench when Bill's childhood friend, Ebby Thatcher's about to be committed to a psych ward. They bring him to the judge and said, "Release him to us. We don't believe that his mania for alcohol is strictly insanity, but we believe there's a spiritual deficiency." And they paroled him to the Oxford groups. They get together. Roland shows up. Ebby shows up. Roland shares the experience he has. Ebby gets a vision in his 11-step morning meditation. And he sees a vision of Bill Wilson that he can't get out of his mind. And he heads over, and then it's changed by the telephone call where Bill was musing. His musing was interrupted. Everything had to happen in Ebby's life precisely up till that point in time in 1934 for that phone call to take place. And everything in our lives up till this moment in time had to take place for us to be here on June 10th when AA is 89 years old, celebrating the gift of sanity and recovery and sobriety and relationship with the power and with each other. and you don't think that there's a master puppeteer running things? Isn't that kind of, I don't know what the word is, but maybe delusional must to say, hey, God, thy will not mine be done, as if we have to say so. God's will is being done, and he's a preparation God. The stories we've all been told have been about instant miraculous occurrences, but really were they, or were they history that no one could describe? In Bill's story last chapter, and then I'll let you go forward, Nadia, because I don't want to go back. He said, God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. And I'm going to tell you what, if you'd have heard Ralph speak at Founders Day yesterday, when he said, I've readjusted my thoughts, I thought that I had the educational variety. But when you look back the last day that you were wherever you were before you were here, when you couldn't get out of where you were, and the next day you found yourself in the atmosphere of grace. If that's not sudden and profound, I don't know what is. And here's what he said, now you just puts my hair stand up. He says, sometimes grace doesn't always look like grace. Sometimes it looks like we're taking your kids for a while. Sometimes it looks like you're under arrest. Sometimes it looks like a divorce paper. And he said, that's grace. That's amazing grace. God was doing for us what we didn't know was in our best interest to get us here at this moment in time. And I look back and think I got a raw deal, because when I went to hit the pipe for the last time, the guy snatched it from me. Talk about a resentment. Might have been the one that was going to blow up my heart. I don't know. But I know this much, that I woke up here one day and thought, oh my God, I've had the educational variety. You better look back and see the most important part of our story. It talks about in chapter 5, what we used to be like. What happened? Divine grace. And what we're like now, that middle part, what happened? That's the message. That's when God stepped in and intervened for myself, because there was an opening for me to receive that amazing grace. So I just want to say that they wrote the book so they could get it out, because there's no way they could have sobered up 2 million people, one drunk at a time. And now what happens is the book has become sacred, and we're starting to rely upon it, because there was a vast period of time in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, when the discussion meetings came out, when they started studying the 12 and 12 and talking about any topic, whoever had the problem of the day. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't even talked about for decades. And all of a sudden, some people had an experience of spirit following the instructions. And they say now Alcoholics Anonymous is making a comeback in the fellowship of AA.
Bill, thank you so much. You know what? You just made me think of how Roland's past was shaped and formed long before he was even born. It reminds me of another book that tells us, you know, we are knitted together and our destiny is known in our mother's wombs. But not only that, there's a promise in the big book that alludes to that. If we go on over to page 124, how Ebby had to go through all the things he had to go through. Bill had to go through that bleak November where he was sitting and his musing was being interrupted. He was sentenced to death there. You know, he'd been kicked out of Towns Hospital a fourth time. And it just made me think of one of the greatest promises this book has. And it, you know, you'll catch me tomorrow and I'll tell you I have another great promise. But for now, for what Bill's just shared with us on page 124, the third paragraph, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert misery and death for them. Our dark past, guys, we do not know how much our dark past is going to help with the paving stone of this path that we're on. Thanks, Bill. That's amazing.
One thing, Nadia, I always say that, which means there's a plethora of things to come. But one more thing for now. Thank you, Rob. For those who are listening to this, Rob posted in the chat a list of people, the first 100 men and women, or 100 men and women, whatever the title is. But I want you to notice something, Nadia. These people are not anonymous in AA. They were anonymous at the level of press, radio, and films, but you weren't going to visit Harold S. or Harold in detox. These people had first and last names in the cities they came from. They weren't promoting. They just needed to be found when God needed them to be found. A couple thousand years ago, they only had one name, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now we got two because there's a lot more of us, I guess.
Oh, Bill, thanks so much. Bill Swan, thank you. So yeah, I kind of jumped ahead there, but let's just look back at that little those three little lines in this paragraph. We've concluded to publish an anonymous volume set forth the problem as we see it. Then there is a solution. They're going to talk a lot about the allergy. Okay. And the problem as we see it is the allergy and the obsession. We shall bring to task our combined experience we've just spoken about, but our combined experience and knowledge, which highlights the allergy and the obsession, is the doctor's opinion right through to chapter 4. And then this should suggest a useful program. Well, that's chapters 5 through to 7 for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. And perhaps sometimes if you're not concerned with your drinking problem, you might need to go out again before, you know, maybe another little blessing of a rock bottom. Again, you know, everything in its place. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. And in step 5, they'll talk about the properly appointed authority, you know, for problems outside of this program. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. But we shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Oh boy, oh boy. I had no real tolerance. I had no respect for opinions, and I had a pretty crappy attitude. But that's so beautiful because, you know, you've got a bunch of alcoholics. We all don't have much regard for other people's opinions. Well, I don't know. I think I'm in the room of, I know that I'm in a room of people who are nodding their heads when I'm saying this. No regard for people's shortcomings, no respect for their attitudes or their opinions. And this is what's so incredible. God has taken a bunch of alcoholics, literally the epicenter of selfishness and self-centeredness, and he's made them. The only thing that they can think of is the well-being of others and how to be useful and how to carry this message and how to present this book, which had been or this solution, which had been so freely given to them. God makes that possible. I definitely cannot make that possible. Me and my own devices, I ain't none of those things. And it's here's a promise. Here we go into a beautiful promise. Okay, this is a promise and a warning and an instruction all in one. Okay, so it's one of those like 3 doozies. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers, there's a promise, there's a warning upon our constant thought of others, and that's the action that we have to take, and how we may help meet their needs. That sentence all on its own is the solution to all my problems. Some of the ladies and gentlemen that I work with who send their their nightly review to me, you know, they'll be like, my mom did this, or my husband's doing this, whatever. And it's all about how are you thinking constantly of how you can serve these people in your lives, you know. So maybe just while we're sitting here with each other, let's just for a 2-3 seconds, let's just reflect on who greeted us today and we can be helpful to them, because our very lives depend on constant thought of others. You may already have asked yourself, why is it that all of us become so very ill from drinking? Ask yourself that question. Have your sponsee ask themselves that question. Have they asked themselves that question? Doubtless, you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, here it is, here's another promise, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you already may already be asking, what do I have to do? You're chomping at the bit. What is it that I have to do? And there it is, guys. There's that word should be in bold and have sparkly letters all over it. What do I have to do? Because this is a simple program, but it's action. It's action. It's doing, doing, doing. There's action and more action. What do I have to do? Not think, read, say. There's a lot of doing in here. Sorry, that's just a little spoiler alert. There's tons of action in this program. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. But what's the other purpose of this book? Let's go see where else it talks about the purpose of this book. On page 45, there are other parts in the chapters, but just for tonight, we're just going to do one little bounce, just one little bounce, page 45, second paragraph. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. Oh, I thought it was a drinking problem. Anyway, we had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, but where and how do I find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And that's it is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. This book, there are death threats in this book. There are instructions in this book. There are promises in this book. There's real life experiences in this. This book doesn't beat around bushes. It don't make no bones about a lot of issues that we have. It is very specific. It is clear cut, simple. You just need someone to take your hand through them. We, who's we? The drunks, the guys that were drunk and desperate and dying and who are now sober and thinking about helping other people. Those guys are going to tell us what they did. So if we want what they had, we're going to do what they did, right? But before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we, those guys, see them, those guys that we're celebrating today. So just a little note that I made there is page 20, and from this paragraph onwards, from page 20, the third paragraph, right through to page 22, the first paragraph, they're not going into a long detailed discussion of who did what and why and whose childhood was like. They're making some very clear points here. And these are points that we ask ourselves, is this me? Have I thought like this? Have people spoken to me like this? Is this my experience? Sponsee, newcomer, relapser, old-timer who's been in the rooms a long time, maybe never ever walked through these pages. These are questions. So we've got to turn all of this stuff into questions. All of these statements here, we turn into questions for ourselves to consider again tonight as a group, or for the newcomer sitting in front of us. Right, here we go. How many times? We're on page 20. We're on the third paragraph. How many times have people said to us, how many times, make this work for you, line it out. How many times have people said to me, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't you? Why can't I? Why can't Nadia? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? Well, I definitely could not drink like a lady. There was none of that happening. I did try, it wasn't happening. And if I did try and drink like a lady, it was no fun. I was not having any fun. And probably those in the room with me were also not having any fun. Why didn't you try beer and wine? Oh man, beers on Wednesdays, wine in winter, red wine for winter, white wine for summer. I've tried all of these combinations. Lay off the hard stuff. That was like the golden rule for me. No hard tack for this lady. I'll just stick to the beer, thank you. But at the end, man, whatever came my way, bathtub gym, COVID, that was definitely one of the things we were making. His willpower must be weak. Now, I don't know. I've met a lot of people in these rooms that are here with me. I've spent a lot of time with them, either on a video call or phone calls or, 911 calls, whichever. And I've got to know a lot of you. And I don't think I'll ever put the word weak-willed people with you. To persevere and to walk this path, which is not an easy path. Don't tell me that you're weak-willed, but we're weak-willed when it comes to alcohol. We have no choice, no power, no choice. Over. Oh, I thought you wanted to say something.
Well, I always want to say something, but I was probably talking to myself, but I want to just go back for a second when you talk about asking the questions in the preceding paragraph or so, and we'll get down right back to that one. But isn't that interesting? Have you ever asked yourself, why is it I've become so seriously ill from drinking? And they're not talking, I don't believe, about the physical aspect. A hangover is remedied with the first drink, or just going through the phases of a hangover. I think what they're talking about is the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that alcoholism, not just drinking, but the disease of alcoholism takes us to. And then it says, doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert medical opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If we go back to the doctor's opinion, when he needs a mental uplift, he thinks of a few cases that were brought to him, two in specific. It says in at the end of this chapter, as to two of you men whose stories I have heard, I would not have accepted you into this hospital. Here's a guy who's taken a Hippocratic oath to preserve, to maintain, to save lives. And he's saying, I would have turned you away at the door because people like you are too heartbreaking. That amazing statement, because he had come to regard listening to the extent that the alcoholic mind existed where it did in them, that there was no solution, that what they would do is the doctor would get involved. He would give all that is in him, like the book says, only to watch the guy disintegrate before his very eyes. That's the heartbreaking riddle of anyone standing outside of the cave looking in at us as we think we're having a good time burning our lives to the ground. But I want to wait till you get to the end of this paragraph, so I'm not going to talk anymore because I have something I think I need to say.
Great. I'm always glad when you got something to say. I talk too much here. All right, willpower. When it comes to alcohol, there ain't no willpower. He could stop. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. Yeah, I've had a few sweet souls in my life, and even for my children's sake, there was no stopping. The doctor told him that if ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. I mean, I think we can tick all of these right for ourselves. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. I just want to, on that note, I know this is not an AA meeting, but there's some really powerful service arms in the different 12-step fellowships. And one of them is the PICPC, Public Information Communication to the Professional Community, taking the disease of alcoholism and taking it to the professional community. Lawyers, doctors, all of those guys that face up to who get to deal with us on a daily basis, social workers, police, psychiatrists, therapists, hospitals, going to tell them, presenting to them the disease of alcoholism. That is just such powerful work. And I've found Yeah, if you're well prepared for that, and you can go into the professional community, because behind a lot of the meetings that I've had, those guys are just like, I didn't want to talk about alcoholics. You guys are, like, just stop. Exactly all of this. Why don't they just stop? Why don't they just act like normal people? Why don't they see their children are being taken from them? And it's all because a lot of misunderstanding. They don't understand the disease. They think it's a matter of willpower. And that is just such integral work that we can be doing. If you're looking for a service opportunity, I beseech you to go to your home group and ask them where you can get involved with PI CBC work, to take this out to the, and I say this with respect and love, and I'm not being derogatory, to the normies out there, to explain the disease of alcoholism to them. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different to ours. What reactions? Their reaction to booze. Those guys that I'm speaking of now, guys, let me just give you a little bit of insight into me. If you were one of those friends who had a drink, and the minute you had it, you were like, oh, I'm starting to feel it. I think I've had enough. Then I'm like, what? 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 That's the whole point. Like, what do you mean you've had enough? They didn't stick around very long, by the way. All right, Bill.
Did you read that last sentence? After back of them is a world of misunderstanding or ignorance. We see that their expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. So this is critical, particularly in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not saying that the people are stupid when they use the word ignorance means without experience or without knowledge. So you don't have the same experience and you're not knowledgeable as to what goes inside of me. When I put a drink inside of me, it sets off it turns the switch, turns the phenomenon of craving into a reality in my life again. The allergy kicks in and I overdrink. But this is a component that we must be careful of, because there's a lot of people that come into the fellowship. You sit side by side and now you're both sober. If you remember, we talked about looking through a set of untrained human eyes. A hard drinker and an alcoholic side by side at a bar will look identical drink for drink. One is drinking voluntary, the other is drinking compulsory or involuntary. So all of a sudden, we find people that look at us, our spouses and parents, and say, what's wrong? Can't you see what you brought? The emotional appeal doesn't work. Well, there's a lot of people coming into AA, and I'll grant you this, maybe they had the phenomenon of craving. And a doctor's opinion says that it never occurs in the average or temperate drinker. So if you've ever had the phenomenon, if the allergy has ever taken hold, be it one time or 1,000, you have the medical description that we call alcoholism. But given sufficient reason for a hard drinker, or maybe even someone who's had the craving, he could stop or moderate. But what about the real alcoholic? And here's where they make the distinction. And I said all that in a circle to say this. Not everyone that comes into our room suffers from the hopeless condition that we know is of alcoholism, and they find it easy. Their alcoholism, as Bob Darrell describes it, is acute. It stops when they put the drink down. Most of us in this room that have quit our jobs to be here every Monday at noon, so we don't miss the miracle, are not of that ilk. When we put the drink down, our lives get worse because we've removed the anesthetic. The medicine is no longer being poured into us to blot out our intolerable situation, which is abstinence. And that being so, you'll hear great things from people who don't suffer from what we says, that say, don't drink no matter what. Guy down in Fort Myers a long time ago told me, telling an alcoholic not to drink is like telling a homeless person to just go out and buy a house. He wouldn't be homeless if he could buy a house, and I wouldn't drink if I could just not drink. I have to be careful because a lot of people won't invest $10 or $12 in a big book to find the information that is necessary to stop a real alcoholic from repeating the cycle over and over again. And you get them in the fellowship. As a matter of fact, some people who have done more investigation than I have, which could be anyone because I don't investigate anything, I just share what I hear as if it's fact. The majority of the people in Alcoholics Anonymous are not of this description, the real alcoholic. Most of them had a drinking problem and consequences because of their drinking and found themselves corralled into Alcoholics Anonymous and find it very appealing to come here. But they don't have to do the self-searching, the leveling of the pride, the seeking the relationship with the power, the making immediate amends, watching for the resurgence of self, taking an inventory, making restitution. In fact, most of them probably haven't done the stuff that we did that require all those things. And what happens is we sit side by side, and an alcoholic that is untreated, so to speak, hasn't found the solution because he's sitting in a platform where the solution is don't drink and go to meetings. We don't care if your butt falls off, bring it to a meeting, as if we got AA surgeons on standby. And what happens is the alcoholic begins to go crazy. And to see the best example, this isn't in the big book, but it is my experience. My ex-wife's favorite movie was The Shining, another Stephen King. I thought it was a horror movie because that's what he writes, thrillers, horror movies. What I didn't realize till I discovered more about alcoholism, it was a story about a guy who was separated from alcohol, got snowed into a hotel, and there was no one there but his skinny little olive oil looking wife and that little kid that rode the big wheel up and down the hall. And because there was no remedy and he couldn't get a drink, he started to lose his mind. He had imaginary conversations with a bartender that wasn't there and having a drink, and then he's sitting at the typewriter pulling out his hair, because the effects of untreated alcoholism are just as deadly sober as drinking. And that's the distinction we're making here. And we'll spend as much time on it as possible. Hell, we're going to take us maybe 5 years to get through the book, but we will get through it. But the reality is, I've got to identify what I am. And just because my mom is ignorant to what kind of thinking dominates me to the first drink, it doesn't mean that that's my excuse to go out and drink because my mother, I need to understand what I have. But I also need to know who I'm sitting next to at a meeting and what direction I'm getting. If it can't be reconciled with the big book, it's great experience, it's great opinion, it's great information, but it's not AA. And like my co-sponsor, Kenny, who just came in, and David used to say, that sounds like BB to me, Bill Swan. I said, what the hell is BB? They said, we don't know, but it ain't AA.
Bill, I reckon if we do things like they did back then, we're celebrating today, but taking a sincere position, I think we might just celebrate a lot of that. Thanks. Yeah. Back in the day, you had to get on your knees in front of a crowd and take the third step if you were convinced of the A, B's, and C's. So now, just like Bill was speaking about now, we might be sitting in the rooms with moderate drinkers, serious drinkers, and maybe the real alcoholic. But that's what this book is going to help us. There's so much identification for the real alcoholic in these pages, and we're going to start looking at a couple of examples now. Page 20 at the bottom, last paragraph. And welcome to those who've just jumped in with us. Rob's going to put a lot of interesting tidbits into the chat as we go along, and he'll keep you posted on where we're at in the book. Moderate drinkers. I just spoke about those guys. I just spoke about them. The one who picks it up and goes, oh, no, I'm starting to feel it. I think I've had enough. And they put half a glass of wine down and they've had enough and they go home. Okay. I don't know. I still, to this day, even though I'm in the rooms, I still do not get those guys. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. Bill was just speaking about him. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, like ill health or finding Mrs. Right or Mr. Right, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, take it or leave it, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. I just want to draw our attention to this paragraph. Here's some really good questions to ask ourselves. Have I had a doctor warn me that I need to stop drinking or using? Have I fallen in love and was hoped that that might be the way I could stop? Maybe marrying Mr. Right would get me to stop drinking, or when we fell ill, did we stop? Was that sufficient enough for us to stop? Ask these questions. Are these some of the techniques you've used in your life to stop? Some of those methods, right, that we've tried. But here we go. What about the real alcoholic, shining material? He may start off as a moderate drinker. And because we're in a room where there are sex and love addicts, there's some gambling addicts, food addicts with us, we can line this out and thinker, eating, all because, we're welcome all 12-step languages here tonight. So, into porn, into, shopping, gambling, dating. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking, using career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. There's that allergy. Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you. So right now, to remember, I said to you, we're in a statement phase here. So the prior page 20, right now to the next end of the next paragraph on the next page. Here are a bunch of questions
before
to
you
ask
get into
yourself.
this long paragraph, Nadia.
Yeah.
Because you said something interesting. You don't understand the moderate drinker. And the moderate drinker is telling us doesn't understand us. The reality is, I can be as ignorant about moderate drinking as they can be about my alcoholism. Because what I just want to do is drink the way they're drinking. And guess what? The way they're drinking, if I'm an abnormal drinker, then they must be a normal drinker. Remembering that alcohol is a drug. Dr. Bob used to have to go down and get a prescription or go to the pharmacy to get some when there was prohibition.
Live in New Jersey 2020. Part 1, number 10, Vineland. In Cumberland.
Ollie, what's going on? Get off the porn site, Ollie, or I'm going to put your full name here on display and all these people can hear it.
It's up there. What did you say you wanted to do? I was reading something.
Yeah, I was reading something to Nadia, but we could hear you interfering with the background. Not that I care.
Oh, no. I'm sorry about that.
Now, brother.
That was
Rob better erase that. So what I'm saying is.
I see what's.
Oh, you're unmuted. I see.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Apologize.
That's okay. That was John Doe. It really wasn't Ollie. I wouldn't put him out there in public radio.
You couldn't blame me.
I think. So the point that I'm making is their reaction is an appropriate reaction to the liquid drug alcohol. Ours is not. Alcoholism is not produced by alcohol. If it were, if alcohol in and of itself was addicting, everyone who drank it would become addicted. But there are those, and we make fun of them in AA. Why would we? It's like making fun of normal people who cut their lawn and pay their bills and send their kids off to college because I can't do it. They're not the enigma or anomaly I am. But what it's saying is, could you imagine? I want to desperately drink like other people. My sponsor said in my case, it's like 10 other people, but nonetheless, I see people that go out and have a couple drinks and get the conviviality, the camaraderie, the companionship that I may have gotten at the beginning of the drinking. It says may start off that way. Some of us were full-blown alcoholic from the first drink. We had the great thirst. We were just able to bounce back because we were much physically stronger and younger at the time. But I can't be ignorant to the fact of my alcoholism, because sometimes I just want to be one of the guys. I want to go to the football game and pay $12 for a half a bottle of beer just to be like the regular guys. Because the expression that I see from them when they take a drink is what I've been so desperately seeking and drinking myself to death over to get. The difference is ours is a low level thirst for connection with the power, the divine, the God of our understanding. And theirs is just getting the normal response, just like if you take a pain pill, if you take it as prescribed, it's going to relieve the pain. My mom left a half a bottle of Vicodin after she had oral surgery. I found it was ready to expire. I had to help her out and take it. I said, Mom, that's drug abuse. She doesn't get the same reaction I do. She gets relief from what it was prescribed to do. Alcohol does certain things, and when people feel it, they stop. When we feel it, we can't wait to continue going, and we want to feel it in perpetuity. As a matter of fact, if I could stay drunk off of one drink, I'd be drunk forever. Same applies to my recovery. If I could stay sober today on a spiritual experience I had decades ago, I would do that too. Both of these, the illness and the recovery process, both require effort on my part. I either got to keep drinking and paying all the consequences, or I got to keep seeking the power, or I will return to keep drinking and paying the consequences, whether I want to or not, because I'm powerless. No power, not less power.
Well, on that powerful note, I think we're going to call it call it a night. Well, call it a morning or a day your side, a night my side, because we're about to jump into a lot of juicy facts finding questions over here. We'll leave that over for next week, Monday. Thank you. All right. So